So today we have a review of the Mrspeakers Aeon Flow Open. This is the first edition. It is not the version which Massdrop made, nor is it the version that Mrspeakers retuned with less dampening, and I think they have different pads as well. So this is original. Now, what does this do better? What does it do worse than in comparison to the competition? So starting with what it does better. This headphone has pretty much the best build out of any headphone in this price bracket, bar none. Now, you might think that something like the Audeze LCD2C might feel more solid, but I think the design of the Aeon Flow is something I trust more over time. So starting with the top, we have these Night Now headband. Now, this is a really strong steel they use in braces, and it really holds its shape very well, as you can see. No trouble bending it like that, and even after doing this many times, there is no loss of tension in the steel headband, nor is there any warping, any of those issues. So really solid headband. You also get a nice leather strap, which distributes weight very well. Nice adjusting mechanism there, which should fit pretty much any size of head. Moving on to the hinge, we get a one arm hinge here, which I think reduces weight a lot, and I believe there's an aluminium hinge, so definitely longevity is an issue there. Moving on to the cups themselves, you have a very nice speckled, almost like a silvery dark blue ring around the edge, as well as I think it is aluminium honeycomb pattern for the grill, along with the Aeon sign there. I believe in Japan it says Flow. Moving on to the pads, we get really nice leather pads that distribute weight very well. If you look, there is a slight curvature to the shape, which really hugs the side of your head really well. So again, with comfort, it's really good, top of the class, I think, and very much ear shaped, and as well as having a really deep kind of hole to have your ear in, so shouldn't have any issues with comfort there. Now, you might notice that there are perforations in this pad, and this is because I'm listening with the pads that are on the Massdrop version. I have listened to these with the original pads, and I will say I prefer these with the fenestrated pads more. So, onto sound. Now, this is a headphone where I think I'm very much disappointed by the sound. It's built so well, it's so comfortable, but the sound really lets it down, I think. And starting with the bass. The bass in this headphone extends okay. Doesn't extend very well for a planar. I think there are planars that extend better, like the LCD2C. The Nanda, pretty much, I think, to my ears, extend better than this. These just sound dead. The bass is kind of lifeless. It's there. It's not lacking quantity. It kind of does have a slight mid-bass bloat, but it just sounds dead. There's no dynamics. It doesn't sound live. I'm not excited to hear it. I don't want to listen to it for more than an hour or so. It's just not very appealing. Moving on to the mid-range. The mid-range, I think tuning is fine as well. It's a little bit cut down. I think in the upper mids, I think it needs a bit more energy there, but it does sound okay. Again, not the most dynamic, not the most detailed for its class, but just acceptable. The treble, I think, again, this is where the problems with the bass comes back. This just sounds absolutely dead in the treble. It's not necessarily lacking dramatically in terms of quantity. Now, I have heard warm headphones. I have enjoyed warm headphones. It's not that like I'm against them, but this headphone really suffers in terms of air. It desperately needs it, and it doesn't have it. And also the dynamic range of the treble also is pretty piss poor there as well. Really sounds compressed and not very airy or shimmery, and it's a lot harder to make out details as a result. So again, the details there, it's just not very easy to make out, and again, I think there are competition which does detail better, even if you ignore the fact that this sounds much more compressed. Things like LCD2C or Ananda, all those things, even the Sundara, I think, is more resolving than this headphone, especially in the treble. Moving on to the details. Now, in terms of detail, I think I went over this a little bit when I talked about this earlier, but in terms of detail, I think this does fall behind its competition a little bit. It is worth its new price tag these days of around $400 US, but if you spend a little more, get LCD2C, Sundara, any of those headphones, detail will be a little bit better on those. So in terms of detail, this falls behind the competition. Its tuning doesn't do it much favors by being a very warm, conservative, I would say even a bit too conservative of a tuning. But again, it does have the added benefit of pretty much never being harsh. Now with these pads, these perforated pads, it does seem to bring back the dynamics a little bit, does seem to increase the slam a little bit, give it a little bit more air, but it doesn't save it from the glaring issues that this has. Dynamics, I think I've ranted about this a lot. Dynamics in this headphone is just not very good, not good enough, needs to be improved. And from what I heard, it might be due to the fact that these headphones are really heavily dampened. So if you look at the driver there, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's actually a piece of white kind of paper filter thing over the actual driver itself. And the back, there seems to be a lot of foam. It is a very dense cup, and from what I know, a lot of it is packed with dampening material. And if you compare this to something like the Ananda right here, you can pretty much see right through the driver. If you hold it up to the light, very clear, you can't see any major dampening. And you compare this to the Aeon, you really see that this is over dampened. And I think that's one of the key areas, or the key design choices that made this sound the way it does. So, other parts of the Soundstage. I think for Soundstage, this headphone is very closed sounding. This is on the big weak area of the headphone. It's an open headphone, but it soundstages like a closed headphone. It is not very wide. It's wider than 600 or 650, but not much. Pretty close, I'd say. And it really doesn't sound as tall as something like an Ananda, but it's tall enough. It is taller than a lot of dynamic drivers. But where this suffers is in terms of openness. This does not sound open at all. I really feel like I'm listening to a closed back headphone a lot of the time. And that's such a shame, because one of the big benefits of opening up a driver is to get that open sound, and this doesn't have an open sound, so it just kind of defeats the purpose of an open headphone. Sometimes I wish this was a closed back headphone instead. Maybe then it would be quite a lot more appealing, because competition would be as tough either. Now, I did do an interesting experiment where I placed these plastic kind of cutouts over the open driver. Now they kind of just go in like that, and they kind of make it semi-open. And honestly, I was really surprised, because most planar headphones or dynamic driver open back headphones, if you cover the backs, it sounds very different. Definitely hear a huge disturbance to the sound. But with this headphone, even though I close it up most of the way, it still sounds the same. So I think that speaks volumes to how heavily dampened this headphone is, because even after closing it up, it still sounds the same. So it kind of makes you ask the question, why not just make it a closed back headphone in the first place if you're going to dampen it so much? What's the point of having an open headphone that doesn't sound open? So you don't really get the benefits of open back, but at the same time you have the drawbacks of sounding closed, of leaking a lot of sound. It just doesn't really make sense to me. It's a bit of a strange headphone design in terms of sound, and I don't know why it was tuned this way, because I think the driver honestly has potential. It's just being held back so much by the tuning, by the dampening, by a lot of other factors. So it really is a shame. Looking at the connectors, it uses a proprietary connector, I believe. I haven't seen this on any other headphone. It's some sort of 4-pin connector. And if you look at the cable, it is a very nice fabric cable that I think, honestly, you don't ever need to get a new cable. I think this will perfectly fit any needs. It's pretty light, it's really flexible, not really janky, and the connectors are of a high quality. So I think this is a really good cable. More headphone companies should do cables and actual physical headphone design like Mrspeakers. I think they've nailed that. It is absolutely comfortable. I can wear this for hours at a time without having to take it off or having any discomfort. The only minor comfort complaint might be that the clamp is a little high, but it is kind of balanced out by the really soft pads that you don't really even notice it. Other accessories include this headphone case right here, and this headphone case is a really solid, really nice hard case, and I reckon it will do a great job protecting your headphones if you ever decide to take it out on the go. Now, what the headphone does come with is some tuning pads. If I can find them, which I may not, but the tuning pads that it comes with range from black tuning pad to a white colored tuning pad with different notches in it. So I'm going to bring them out. I'm going to talk about them. So these are the white tuning pads. And if you see, there are different notches in these tuning pads. So with the white tuning pads, the one notch ones, these I find really call the highs, which is bad because these headphones do not have a lot of highs in the first place. So these make it even more dead than it actually sounds already. So once you put these in, it really is an unpleasant listening experience where it just feels like there is absolutely no air, there's no treble extension. It just feels yeah, if it sounds lifeless, this makes that sound twice as bad. Now the two notch pads are slightly less thick dampening. Also kind of does the same thing that these do, but with a little less severity, I guess. So they're on the edge of just listenable. If you really hate treble, you absolutely despise any sort of treble, I think maybe you can give these a try, but honestly, I wouldn't recommend it with either of these white dampenings. Now, the final dampening foam they offer are these sort of black foamy things. And with these filters, it is probably the least dense of all the materials of the three. And the benefit of that is it doesn't really stray too much from the original in terms of tuning. So if you like a warmer sound and you don't really mind compression, or you're not really hunting for that detail, if you just want something that never fatigues you, that just is, even though it sounds dead, even though it doesn't slam, you don't mind that because you don't listen to a lot of music with tons of bass or a lot of treble. I guess these might work. I don't know. But with these pads, what they do is they cut down the treble ever so slightly, bring out the bass ever so slightly. It is a very small change, and I think if you were to try playing around with these filters, this would be the one I would start with because it is probably the most tasteful of the three. So moving away from the filters, back to the headphones. How does it compare to competition? Now, this is a headphone which I think falls behind. Back when it first released, it falls behind, and even now, it falls behind even more. LCD 2C, I take that over this any time of the week. The LCD 2C has better bass extension, better slam, better air. I would say that almost in every single factor, the LCD 2C wins. It's better detail, almost everything. The only thing where this might win a little more is for vocals. I think for vocals, this does make them a little more present. It's a little more balanced than the LCD 2C, which sometimes make them steep back a little bit, especially female vocals. I think female vocals in particular sound better on the Aeon, but that's just one small niche. Everything else, every other part of the music, the background melody, the bass, the drums, or the cymbals, and anything else, the LCD 2C wins. Ananda, with the Ananda, pretty much beats this in every single conceivable category. I can't think of any way that this can beat the Ananda, unless you really hate treble. Unless you really despise treble, you never want to ever hear any of it. Well, not any of it, but if you really hate treble, then I guess you might like this a little more than Ananda, but you're sacrificing so much technicality, you're sacrificing so much soundstage detail and just clarity that honestly, this is not worth it. Sandara, similar issue. Sandara performs better than this at a cheaper cost as well. But this is built better, but still, I would take the sacrifice in build for that sound improvement. LCD 1, I take that over this again because same kind of deal as with the Sandara. Just details better, slams more, sounds more alive. Even though the tuning might not be as warm as this, I don't mind it. It's also very comfortable, even though this is built better. So again, as it might be pretty clear already compared to competition, both modern and during its time, this is a headphone that really falls behind in most categories. So overall, to sum this headphone up, this is a headphone that appeals to a very niche audience. Someone that doesn't really care too much about the treble or the bass, just cares about the mids, and doesn't mind a bit of compression or a lot of compression in the bass and the treble, and is really finicky about comfort. Really wants just the best build, the best comfort. That's their main concern. Then maybe you want this headphone. But for pretty much any other situation, there's a slew of other headphones that I recommend in this price bracket. HD 660s, Sandaras, DT 1990s, LCD 2C, Focal LX, the list goes on and on and on, because these simply do not compete with those headphones. The driver, I think, if you really retuned it, could compete, but as it is, in this form, not the mass drop form or the new tweaked form from Dan Clark Audio, I think they're selling a couple of those with reduced dampening. Those might compete, but these honestly don't. So if you are interested in picking up a pair of these, I'll definitely proceed with caution, because this is definitely not for everybody, and this is definitely not for me.